I'm a fucking nerd when it comes to tattooing. Traditional has its place and it always will, because it's the most bare bones version of what a tattoo can be. I want it to feel like a tattoo shop and not a doctor's office. If you truly want to push a style of tattooing and you really want to expand as an artist, you can't limit yourself in any way. The idea of becoming a tattooer is literally just through researching tattooing. There's a lot of history in tattooing and various styles, and everything's been done and there's still things being found out. You know, there's some sheets up on the wall that are from the 1920s. There's some stuff that was painted last week. That's kind of what I want the shop to be. I want it to be a little slice of that, just showcasing tattooing of where it's come from, where it's going, and just everything in between. It works both ways, because it inspires us as artists and it inspires clients, because they might come in and they just want like a little walk-in. After spending an hour in here, they've seen like a panther on the wall and they're like, I didn't know I could get a panther, and they're like, can I get that tattooed? And I'm like, yeah. I want a tattoo shop that looks like a tattoo shop. I want you to walk in here and be like, oh yeah, I'm getting tattooed today. I want it to feel like a tattoo shop and not a doctor's office. The appeal that traditional tattooing has and always will have is that it's recognisable. When you think tattoo, you think like, you know, eagles, anchors, ships. A rose tattoo is so classic, and there's so many ways of doing it. And I think for me, traditional tattooing, it's the most stereotypical form of a tattoo. You know, it gets compared a lot to like cartoons, but the way they're both drawn is that it's to fit the purpose. It's, you know, it's recognisable, it's simple, it's mass produced. That's the purpose of traditional tattoos. You know, you're meant to do 100 eagles. If I hadn't tattooed 100 eagles in my career, I'd be quite concerned. Traditional has its place and it always will, because it's the most bare bones version of what a tattoo can be. Yeah, there are more interesting styles out there. There's a lot more technical styles, but for me, I enjoy that challenge of bringing those different elements of tattooing to this style. It's one of the reasons I've started to switch to using Greywash now. Greywash isn't commonly associated with traditional tattooing. It's usually people would just use black, or use like an opaque grey. But for me, it's like, you know, I mainly focus on doing black and grey traditional tattooing, and I just want to add another element to that. Although it's still a simple design, where I then try and make up the differences, that I want to have kind of technical shading on it. I want to mess around with the texture of on the skin. You know, I want to mess around with how tattoos age and how they heal. And I overlooked Greywash for a long time, because it's always branded, it's always sold as, you know, if you do portraits, use this. I came from that era of tattooing where it's like, you know, you kind of just work it out and you'd find it out and you'd experiment. So for years I never used Greywash, because I was always like, well, I can just water down black, or I can just use an opaque grey, and those products weren't ever targeted at my style of tattooing. I was kind of felt they're irrelevant. But it's the thing I've learned is that it's still tattooing. I'm smart enough and I'm curious enough that I want to try it out and I want to make a decision for myself. You know, people can be like, you should use this, don't use this, don't use this. And it's like, yeah, I can listen to that, or I can find out why. The way I shade is what's known as whip shading. And all that is basically my hand is moving too quick for the machine. And I mean, at first people did that and it was kind of an accident. And now it's become part of the style of tattooing. It's just messing around with moving your hand faster than the machine. And a whole new style's born from that. But a lot of tattooing is that. If for years, you know, there wasn't a designated black ink for tattooing, so people were using like drawing ink, and it was very much people just had to find what worked. And same with like colour ink. I mean, one of the first tattooers to discover purple ink was Sailor Jerry, and for years, like, artists had tried beforehand, and he found it he spoke to a doctor, and they used the pen they used to mark the skin, and he mixed it with white tattoo ink and created purple ink, and it was just an experiment like that. You really want to seek the knowledge and you really want to push your own limits, you've got to go off the path. You've got to just try things, you've got to speak to people, and you've got to experiment. That's with loads of things, whether that's ink, whether that's aftercare, whether that's needles, machines, stencil paper, whatever it is. You know, don't just use what people tell you to use. Find what you like to use. Prove them wrong, prove yourself wrong, open your mind up to new, you know, just pushing your own boundaries of what you think your work could be. If you truly want to push a style of tattooing and you really want to expand as an artist, you can't limit yourself in any way. It's like the amount of people who are just like, no, traditional tattooers don't use Greywash, what are you doing? The fact I can use it and I know how to use it, and I'm trying to push it through my work, is just having that different levels of shade and depth in my work gives me a foot above everyone else, because there are people out there that are looking at my work and probably wondering, oh, how's he achieved that? Maybe don't realise that I've been using something as simple as Greywash. There's been certain tattoos where I'm like, right, I'm just going to go from black to the different stages of the grey wash, and then I'll maybe drop some white in there at the end just to kind of have that slow gradient. And then there's been other tattoos where I'm like, okay, like I don't necessarily need to use grey in this. Is there just a little extra I can put in it just to kind of give it something else? Kind of mess around with this in the sense of, you know, trying to do like a nice flat area of grey just to give a bit of shade, or, you know, want to drop a bit of shadow behind something. Because it's not associated with this style of tattooing usually, if I can kind of use it to my advantage and try and have a mess around with how much depth and lightness I want in a tattoo, it's win-win for me. I think I've always enjoyed having those limitations. So for years I did just use black, and I was like, right, I've got to make this work just using this. And that's the benefit I found with the grey wash set, is that I can now be like, right, well, I know I can do this all in black, so how can I just give it that little bit extra, set it apart from other people's tattoos, or just bring something new to the table.